everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we're going to be discussing everybody's favorite subject, collaring. Only today we're not going to be talking about how to design the perfect collaring ceremony, though we may get into a little bit of that actually, spoiler alert. And we're not going to be talking about, the pros and cons of having a permanent metal locking collar. What I want to discuss is something that's oftentimes very overlooked in the BDSM community, which is the concept of self-collaring. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the way that this came back up for me again is when I recently decided to start wearing collars in videos. I did have people leave a variety of comments assuming why that might be, and one of the answers was because I self-collared myself. And honestly, it hasn't really been something that I've thought a lot about, and just to put it out there, guys, I did not self-collar myself, at least not yet. However, I do think that it can be something that is useful for a lot of people that might be worth knowing more about. So today, that's what we're going to discuss. Now, backing up a little bit here, what is self-collaring? What does that mean? Well, first of all, in the BDSM community, collaring is generally taken to mean that you have some kind of committed DS relationship, and when you are the one that is collared, you have made some kind of promise to abide by the rules, expectations, whatever relationship style or pattern that you have with a dominant partner. And in fact, some people do generally take it to mean that a collaring ceremony in particular, going through the act of being collared, is a very important, very, very life-changing decision to make, that it's almost like sort of the kink equivalent of deciding to be married. And because it does usually have these DS connotations, and especially that marriage connotation, does that mean that you can really collar yourself? I mean, it's not like you can get married to yourself after all. And I think it's important to understand that, the BDSM community is a diverse place, right? We all have totally different ways of experiencing what we do. Our motivations are different. The intent and the meaning behind things can be very different for very different people. And that being said, I don't generally think it's the case that people are like self-collaring themselves with the intention to like Jekyll and Hyde, like being their own dom, where they're like giving themselves like the full Monty of rules and punishments and titles, and like looking at themselves in the mirror going like, oh yeah, I'm such a bad girl. Like, generally people don't take it to that level where it's a very literal idea of being your own dominant. Generally, the way that I have experienced this, seen this, heard it be talked about, is that it's a symbolic gesture. It's about the intention of treating yourself as a submissive in the way that a dominant would. Hopefully that clears it up a little bit. It's a way to encourage yourself to remember to treat your body with kindness, maybe give yourself a little bit of that tough love that you need, and remind yourself to keep working towards those self-imposed goals that you have. And I think that can be a really wonderful and beautiful thing, and it can happen for so many reasons. And I think from my own anecdotal experience, I would say that deciding to self-collar is something that can be very useful for people that are going through a transition state after they have had a long-term DS relationship. And I talked about this in my video on the toxic side of submission, but especially when you are in a long-term DS relationship, depending on your relationship framework and, the way that you did things and who had responsibility for what, it can be difficult to remember, like, how to just like take care of yourself in like a vanilla context. Like, it's weird, the things that you stop and you're like, oh, normally my partner like told me to do this, and now that I don't have that like external force like reminding me to do something, I have to kind of like re-strengthen my internal sense of when I need to do something to motivate myself internally rather than relying on external methods. And it's very interesting because, all of us just in life, we have preferences sort of naturally for needing internal or external motivation. And the way that typically long-term DS works is you really try and cultivate that need for external validation, approval, and direction, because that is sort of what can create a lot of the bonding in a DS relationship. And it can be a positive thing and it can be really great, but if you're not very careful, you know, that intrinsic motivation muscle that you have atrophies, and you have to kind of build it back up. And self-collaring can be a tool for helping you build back up that intrinsic motivation muscle. And I think with the act of self-collaring and having a collar, again, having that visual reminder, not anymore of a commitment towards somebody else, but as a commitment towards yourself, that can be a really wonderful way to remind yourself that, like, you know, these are the things that I need to do, and this is how I take care of myself, and it's okay to prioritize myself. It's okay that I am my own first priority, because oh my gosh, that is such a big thing after a lot of people leave a DS relationship that's really long term, is like, you know, I spent all this time like prioritizing my partner. I spent all this time prioritizing, you know, their happiness. You know, I was happy in that too, of course, as a submissive, and it was fulfilling for me, but like, having permission again to like prioritize your happiness and loving yourself first, like, whew, it's a doozy for anyone, but especially a submissive getting out of a long-term DS relationship. And it's not just for people that have been in a long-term DS relationship. You know, I know people that before they were collared by anybody else, they collared themselves first, and that could be because they wanted to have their commitment to themselves as their priority, to not maybe get swept up in sub frenzy or rushing after a dom. I mean, it could be for superficial reasons, like just they want to have permission, they feel like, to be able to wear a collar that looks cute, and like, that's fine, whatever. Do what you want, you're not hurting anybody else. And it could also be because, you know, they want to know what it feels like to wear somebody's collar before they have somebody else put it on them. It's entirely self-controlled, and, you know, being able to kind of bottom for yourself to know what it feels like to wear a collar, like, that can be an important source of information that maybe you wouldn't be able to get if you first had to like give up your trust to somebody else to do that for you, you know. And actually, one of the first people that I ever met in the BDSM community, I was like, I don't remember how old I was, but it was like one of the first people that I ever even talked to on FetLife. We went to a party together, and I noticed that while we were there that she was wearing a collar, and she had a partner that she was with, and I asked, you know, sort of out of ignorance, like, oh, are you collared? Because I knew the term, and I kind of knew what collars meant, but not really the details of it. And I didn't necessarily know that might be a rude question, but like, hey, I was still learning. I had been in the scene for like weeks at that point, so, you know, I have to forgive my younger self. But the person replied in a very honest and very real way, and they were just like straight out like, oh yeah, I collared myself. And they explained that it was this thing about, you know, having a duty to themselves first, and a reminder to take time for self-care, that it was okay to prioritize their own needs and happiness, and they didn't just have to live for somebody else. And I thought that was so like beautiful and wonderful and amazing, and I had no idea that other people did this. I just thought it was this person, and I was like, wow, this is so amazing, and this person is like so dedicated to not like losing themselves in submission, in the sense that like you can really like lose your sense of identity and self when you are submissive to somebody, and having that, you know, kind of core priority to you can kind of help preserve that, I think. So I just thought that was so wonderful and so beautiful. And of course, over time, I learned that it wasn't just this one person, that many people self-collar for many, many different reasons. And of course, I should be careful to say here, just because the act of self-collaring was like a very deep, meaningful thing to like one person I knew, that doesn't necessarily mean that like all collarings, self-collaring or otherwise, are like very, very deeply meaningful in a very specific way. So like tattoos, it's dangerous to make assumptions that every collar, every tattoo is baked in with this very important meaning. Like, sometimes tattoos do have very deep meaning about like, oh, you know, this is a memorial for my brother that passed away at a young age. Or maybe it's just like, I don't know, I got kind of drunk and I like this tattoo artist and they were open, so like I walked over to their shop and I just said, that one please, and they picked one out, you know. And with collars, with collaring, it can be because it's really meaningful. It could be because you just like wearing collars, like I talked about before. It can also literally just be a very practical thing. It can just be because it's a very clear way to signal to people that you are on the submissive side of the spectrum. And I know this is controversial, and like you should always read like the rules before you go to a venue and read the dress code, because some places are very strict that only properly collared submissives should be wearing collars, and that if you aren't collared by a dominant that's there, that you should wear one. It's like this whole rigmarole. So make sure you know what the rules are before you go somewhere. But generally, I do think that wearing a collar can be just a simple sign that you are submissive. And especially, and I hate to say this is a fact, but like it's true, if you don't look conventionally like a submissive person, it might be helpful to wear a collar. Like if you're like an ex-volleyball player, like woman who's like, you got wonderful shoulders, you're real tall, but you're submissive to like every bone in your body, like people are gonna, ooh, look, an Amazonian goddess that I need to worship, yes queen. And it's like, no, actually I'm submissive. Sometimes wearing a collar can help correct incorrect signals that people may be reading into just your physical appearance. Or if you're, let's say, a male submissive in a space that is dominated by, you know, male dominance and female submissives, you know, people might assume that you're dominant because of your gender, honestly. Wearing a collar can help communicate that to kind of, you know, get past people's initial impression. And also, it can be super helpful if you're a switch. And some days you go to parties and you're more on your dom side. Other times you go to parties, you're more on your sub side. And maybe just a helpful little tool to tell people in your community, hey, today I'm feeling dominant, today I'm feeling submissive, and wearing collars can help with that. Now, I've kind of gotten out of the self-collaring discussion into just wearing collars in general, but, you know, self-collaring is part of that, and it doesn't have to always be meaningful. It's okay if you're just wearing a collar because you like one. It doesn't have to be a whole big shebang. Now, you can have it be a big whole shebang if you want to. So if you are interested in self-collaring, if the ideas of you know, committing to yourself and your self-care and your self-improvement really resonate with you, and you want to have kind of a ritual to solidify that, because it's a very BDSM thing to do, is doing rituals, you can have a self-collaring ceremony. Now, the sort of traditional stereotype of like a BDSM collaring ceremony is it's basically like a kinky wedding. You don't have to do that. You don't have to hire an officiant. You don't have to do anything like that. You can literally just have like a very like still quiet moment, you know, maybe in your room somewhere private, you know, maybe you light some candles, maybe you have incense, a mirror or something, and you say like a short dedication to yourself or a mantra or a poem. You write something where you sort of set the intention for why you're wearing that collar, and maybe write it down, keep it with you so you can always have it, you know, when there's like dark times, when you're struggling, you know, just like you would do with a regular relationship. It's helpful to remember sort of the intention that you have and like why, rather than like why you're with this person, you know, why you chose to put this collar on yourself, why you made that commitment. It can also just be something really simple, like you wake up in the morning and you get in the shower and then you get out, you look yourself in the mirror and you go, today I want to wear a collar, I think I'm ready. And you put the collar on and then you wear it for however long, you know, you want that intention to last for. You know, it can really exist on the spectrum of different experiences. It can be as like woo and ritual as much as you want it to be. It can be as simple and plain and just in your own head as you want it to be. And also remember with this, you don't have to justify yourself to anybody. That is like the biggest thing. Well, I've learned a lot of big things like trusting your gut instinct and things like that, but one of the big things, I guess I'll say, that I have really learned over my time in the BDSM world is you do not have to justify yourself to other people. And it is fine if other people don't like something that you do or why you chose to do something. You don't have to change yourself to meet their expectations. And one quick thing that I really just wanted to add before the end here, because I almost forgot to say this, was that when I say collaring, it doesn't actually have to literally be something around your neck. Just like with regular sort of mainstream DS collaring in the kink world, like it doesn't have to literally be a collar in the physical sense, right? A collar could also be a bracelet, it could be a silicone ring, it could be a piercing, a tattoo, it could be whatever you want it to be, okay? It's the intention behind it that matters, not necessarily the physical object. And if you can't wear one because of your job or you don't want your family to know or anything else, like you don't have to have it literally be a collar. It can be anything else that you want it to be. But that is everything I wanted to say, and we'll get back into the rest of the video. I'm sure if you self-collar, there are going to be people that love it and think it's beautiful and wonderful and amazing. I will be one of those people. I will be like, yes, good job. There will also be people that's like, this is destroying the meaning of collaring. This is why MS, you know, blah, blah, blah. They're just going to go into some kind of crazy diatribe where they're like, just, this is why, and the youngins in the BDSM community, don't you know that when I had to get collared, I had to walk through coals on my hands and knees first, and then I had to read the Bible backwards out loud. Just, listen, Janet, just because that's what you had to do in your relationship in order to get a collar doesn't mean that all of us have to be held to those expectations. So, you know, just remember that it's okay to do things for you. And the important part is that it's what you want to do, what feels true to you, not what other people around you are saying is okay. Like, there's not BDSM police, there's not BDSM laws. Like, we have cultural expectations as like being members of the BDSM community, and I really don't think that people think that negatively about self-collaring. And you might be surprised to hear that, because I was really surprised. Like, I was sure when I was researching this, like, I was gonna get just like all kinds of MS, TPE, property owner type blogs that were going to be like, this is destroying the meaning of collars, blah, 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 this is disrespecting the intention of the BDSM community. And like, literally every article, every story, everything that I read about self-collaring was empowering and encouraging, and just like, this was so wonderful for me. This is such a great idea. I'm so glad that I did this. And of course, you know, it's not always going to work out. It's not like a magic overnight fix for your problems. It's just a nice symbolic thing to have that can be imbued with as much meaning as you want it to have. So hopefully this helped answer some of your questions about self-collaring. If you do have any additional questions for me, stories, experiences that you would want to share, you can go ahead and put that down in the comment section below. If you like this video, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. My videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related content. And finally, if you really enjoyed this, please do consider going over to my Patreon. Link to that will be down in the description box below. We are currently working towards 1,000 patrons, and when we get there, I will have tons of exclusive new content that I want to produce, like maybe a drama podcast, for example. If you want to see that side of my content and my experience and opinions, that is one of the goals that we're working towards. So if you want to check that out, please do. A link to that will be again down in the description box below. If you already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye bye.